after a Gold Star widow was told a new VA directive meant her husband's sacrifice was no longer fully covered. Her heartbreaking story of bureaucratic betrayal prompted Stephen Colbert to launch a nightly segment that shamed the administration until the president himself was forced to act. The moment the segment, titled "The President's Watch," aired, the digital world ignited. Before the commercial break was even over, clips were being cut and shared at a blistering pace. There was no hashtag, no coordinated campaign, just the raw power of a story that cut through the noise. News producers, rival network hosts, and political operatives immediately recognized the segment not as a punchline, but as a declaration of war fought on the grounds of simple human decency. On social media, the face of Sergeant Marcus Vance, stoic and smiling in his dress uniform, began appearing everywhere, juxtaposed with the cold, ticking clock Colbert had placed beside it. The battle wasn't about right versus left. It was about right versus wrong, and an entire nation had just been called to bear witness. Just 3 days earlier, the world for Alara Vance had been silent. It was a silence she had grown to hate, the quiet of a house in Fort Collins, Colorado, that was once filled with the booming laugh of her husband, Sergeant Marcus Vance. Marcus wasn't a combat casualty in the traditional sense. He hadn't fallen in a distant desert or a remote mountain pass. He had died during a live fire training exercise at Fort Carson, a tragic accident involving a faulty artillery piece. The Army had called it a non-hostile, duty-related incident. They gave her a flag, condolences, and a stack of paperwork that promised she and their 6-year-old son, Leo, would be taken care of. For 18 months, that promise had been kept. The survivor benefits weren't a fortune, but they were a lifeline. The buffer that allowed her to grieve without the immediate terror of foreclosure. The letter that shattered this fragile peace arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a pizza coupon and a water bill. It was from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Its crisp, official letterhead felt menacing. The language inside was a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation, full of clauses and subsections. But the message was brutally simple. Due to a recent legislative clarification within the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, survivor benefits were being reevaluated. The new interpretation prioritized casualties resulting directly from hostile action. As Marcus's death was classified as a training accident, her benefits were being suspended pending a review, a process that could take, the letter suggested, an indefinite amount of time. It mentioned a specific provision, Title IX, Section 214, Clause B, as if naming the weapon would make the wound hurt less. Alara read it 3 times. Her hands started to shake. Betrayal was a cold, sharp thing. It wasn't the fury of an argument. It was the icy calm of realizing the system you believed in, the one her husband had died serving, had just turned its back on her. She went to the VA website, the first battlefield. It was a digital fortress of drop-down menus and dead links. She typed Title IX, Section 214, Clause B into the search bar. The result was a 4,000-page PDF of the bill itself, unsearchable and incomprehensible. She tried the Contact Us portal, which led to an automated chatbot that asked if she needed help resetting her password. Every click was a door slamming in her face. She was invisible. Her husband's sacrifice, it seemed, had been relegated to a rounding error in a budget. That night, after putting Leo to bed, she sat at her kitchen table and did something she never imagined doing. She turned on her phone's camera. She didn't cry. She was beyond tears. Her voice was low, steady, and devastatingly clear. "My name is Alara Vance," she began. "My husband was Sergeant Marcus Vance. He died for this country. He didn't die the way you see in movies, but his loss is just as real. Today, the country he died for told me his sacrifice isn't covered anymore." She held up the letters. "They say it's because of something called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I just have one question. How is this beautiful?" She didn't ask for money or help. She just spoke her truth into the small, dark lens. then uploaded the 2-minute video to a private online group for military spouses, a small digital community of people who would understand. She thought that would be the end of it. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, President Donald Trump was having a very different kind of day. Standing before a roaring crowd at a rally, he was in his element. "We passed the one big beautiful bill, didn't we?" he boomed, his voice echoing through the arena. "They said it couldn't be done. We cut the waste, we got rid of the fraud, and we are putting America first. We streamlined the VA. No more waiting, no more games. We are taking care of our heroes. It's beautiful, isn't it?" The crowd erupted, a sea of cheers and red hats. The confidence radiating from the stage was absolute. He was a man who had built a fortress of his own, not of confusing websites, but of unwavering belief in his own narrative. To him, the bill was perfect. The details were irrelevant. The headline was all that mattered. In New York City, the writer's room of The Late Show was a chaotic mix of stale coffee, whiteboards covered in scribbled jokes, and the low hum of laptops. It was the daily hunt for material. Stephen Colbert sat at the head of the table, listening as his team pitched ideas. They had plenty of material on the president's rally, the usual collection of misstatements and bombast that formed the bread and butter of their political comedy. But Colbert was looking for something more. He felt the fatigue of the daily cycle, the way outrage had become a renewable but ultimately non-nutritious resource. "We need to cut through," he said, tapping a pen on the table. "It all feels like noise. What's the signal?" That's when a junior writer, a quiet woman named Maya, spoke up. I might have something," she said, her voice hesitant. "A friend of mine is in a support group for military families. A video was posted last night. It's starting to get shared a little bit outside the group. I think you should see it." She turned her laptop around. The room fell silent as they watched Alara Vance's face, her voice filling the space with its raw, dignified pain. When the video ended, nobody spoke. The usual cynical energy of the room had evaporated. Colbert stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. He had spent years deconstructing political theater, expertly pointing out the absurdity and hypocrisy of the powerful. He had built a career on parodying the very brand of political performance President Trump had just delivered at his rally. But this was different. This wasn't theater. This was the consequence, the signal in the noise. He looked at Maya. "Is she real? Is this verified?" "And we're working on it now," his head writer, Chris Licht, interjected. "Fact-checkers are digging. Initial search of the bill shows there is a section on benefits rationalization. It's dense, but it looks like her claim is plausible." "Get her on the phone," Colbert said, his voice quiet but firm. "Do not pressure her. Just ask her if we have her permission to tell her story. And find a photo of her husband. A good one." The decision was made. The easy jokes about the rally were scrapped. Tonight, the show would not just be about pointing out the absurd. It would be about demanding an answer. The quiet determination in the room was palpable. They weren't just making a TV show anymore. They were taking up a cause. Hours later, the studio audience was roaring at Colbert's opening monologue. He had delivered his usual slate of jokes, a rapid-fire takedown of the day's political follies. But as the applause died down, he didn't pivot to a commercial or a pre-taped sketch. He walked to the front of his desk, and the lighting shifted subtly, becoming more focused, more intimate. "You know," he began, his voice dropping its performative comedic tone, "we hear a lot of promises from our leaders. Big, beautiful promises." Yesterday, President Trump was at a rally, talking about his One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And he said this about how he's helping our veterans. A clip of Trump's rally speech played on the screen behind him. "We are taking care of our heroes. It's beautiful, isn't it?" The audience clapped, some out of reflex, some out of genuine agreement. Colbert held up a hand. "It does sound beautiful," he said. "Who wouldn't want that? To take care of our heroes. It's the one thing, the absolute one thing, we should all be able to agree on. But sometimes, the beauty of a bill, or a promise, depends on where you're standing, or where you're sitting." He paused. Last night, a woman named Alara Vance sat at her kitchen table in Colorado and recorded a video. It wasn't for a news channel or a political campaign. It was for other military families. I want you to see it. Alara's face filled the screen. The studio was dead silent. The only sound was her voice, telling her story, holding up the letter. The audience was no longer an audience. They were 400 people sitting in a stranger's kitchen, bearing witness to her private grief turned public insult. When the clip ended, the screen behind Colbert changed. On one side was the official portrait of Sergeant Marcus Vance, a handsome young man with kind eyes. On the other side, a stark, black digital clock appeared, its numbers glowing white. 00 days, 03 hours, 22 minutes, 16 seconds. Colbert looked directly into the camera, his expression a mixture of sorrow and steel. That clock, he said, is how long it has been since Alara Vance was told her husband's sacrifice was no longer covered. This is Sergeant Marcus Vance. He served his country. He died in that service. His wife and his 6-year-old son, Leo, are now facing the loss of their benefits because of a clause, a piece of fine print, in a bill the president calls beautiful. He let the weight of that statement hang in the air. So, we're going to do something new here. Every night that this injustice continues, we're going to start a new watch. It's called the President's Watch. We're going to put Sergeant Vance's picture up, and we're going to keep this clock running. We're going to count the days, the hours, the minutes, until the President, or the VA, or anyone in a position of power, makes this right. Until they answer Alara Vance's question. Until they can look her in the eye and explain how any of this is beautiful. He took a breath. It's easy to make a promise at a rally. It's harder to keep it in the quiet of a home in Colorado. We'll be keeping time. He looked from the clock back to the camera, his gaze unflinching. We're still waiting, Mr. President, and so are they. The show cut to black. The silence was deafening. The digital shockwave from the broadcast crashed over Alara Vance in the middle of the night. Her phone, which she'd silenced and left on the nightstand, began vibrating so incessantly it buzzed its way off the edge and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Startled awake, she saw the screen glowing with an impossible number of notifications. Texts from friends she hadn't spoken to in months. Missed calls from her parents, her sister, Marcus's old army buddies. A friend from high school had messaged her on Facebook. Oh my God, Alara, are you watching Colbert? Is that you? Is that Marcus? She stumbled into the living room and turned on the TV, flipping to a 24-hour news channel. Her own face, from the video she'd made at her kitchen table, was in a small box on the screen. In a larger box was a political pundit, his face grim, saying, Colbert has weaponized this widow's grief in a deeply cynical way. On another channel, a different pundit was saying the opposite. This is what journalism should be. He's holding the most powerful man in the world accountable for the life of a single American. They were talking about her as if she were a concept, a political chess piece. But then they showed the picture of Marcus again, the one from their wedding, the one she kept on Leo's bedside table, and next to it, that relentless, stark clock, ticking upwards. For the first time since the letter arrived, she felt a sliver of something that wasn't despairing. It was a terrifying, fragile thing, so foreign she could barely name it. It was hope. The next morning, the White House was a fortress under siege from within its own press corps. The press secretary, a man named Gavin Hayes, whose primary skill was an unshakable composure, stood at the podium, ready to discuss trade policy with China. The first question came from a veteran reporter in the front row. Gavin, do you have a response from the President or the VA to Stephen Colbert's segment last night regarding the Gold Star widow Alara Vance? Hayes' smile was a thin, practiced line. The President has done more for our veterans and their families than any administration in history. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act is a landmark piece of legislation designed to cut waste and eliminate the fraud that has plagued the VA for decades. The President's commitment to our heroes is absolute. "That doesn't answer the question," a reporter from another network called out. "What about Alara Vance? What about Sergeant Marcus Vance? Is the administration claiming his death in service doesn't count?" Individual benefits cases are handled by the Department of Veterans Affairs through the proper, established channels, Hayes said, his voice flat and robotic. "We don't comment on specific cases from this podium. It would be inappropriate." "So you're saying she's just a case?" the first reporter pressed. Colbert put a clock on it. "Is the president aware that the entire country is now watching a countdown on his promise to a grieving family?" "The president is aware of the television programming choices of late-night comedians," Hayes retorted, a hint of disdain creeping into his voice. "He is, however, more focused on running the country than on political theater. Next question." He pointed to a friendly outlet in the back of the room, but the damage was done. He hadn't said her name. He had reduced her pain to an administrative file number, and her husband's sacrifice to a case-by-case review. The dismissal was as loud as a gunshot. For Stephen Colbert, the 24 hours after the broadcast were a maelstrom. The show's ratings had exploded. The network executives were ecstatic, but their emails were tinged with a nervous energy. The network's legal department had already received 3 different cease and desist letters from conservative activist groups. His social media, once a stream of fan praise and witty banter, had become a toxic sludge pit. The threats were no longer vague insults. They were specific, laced with violent imagery, and directed not just at him, but at his family. His wife's name was mentioned. His children's schools were named. The CBS security team, without being asked, doubled his personal security detail. The quiet, serious men in suits becoming a constant, unsettling presence. The weight of it was more than political. It was personal. He and his team were now custodians of Alara Vance's story. They had established a single, secure line of communication to her, handled by Maya, the young writer who had found the video. They needed to protect Alara from the media storm they had unleashed, while also getting her permission for every new step they took. That evening, after a day of tense meetings and screening hateful emails, Colbert drove home. The silence in his car was a welcome relief. He found his wife, Evelyn, in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. She had been his partner through his entire public life. From his anarchic days on Strangers with Candy, to the heights of the Colbert Report, and the pressure of taking over Letterman's desk, she knew the cost of his convictions. "The security detail followed you all the way to the driveway," she said quietly. "It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. They're just being cautious," he said, loosening his tie. "Are they, Stephen?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "I saw the things they're writing online. This isn't like the correspondence dinner. This isn't about making George Bush squirm. These people feel like you attacked their king, and they're defending him with a fervor that is terrifying." He sat down across from her, the exhaustion of the day settling into his bones. "I know," he sighed. "I saw them too." "So I'll ask you," she said, looking him directly in the eye. "Are you sure about this? Is it worth it? For a TV segment?" Colbert leaned forward, his hands wrapping around his own mug. "It stopped being a TV segment the moment I saw her face," he said, his voice low and earnest. "Evie, we go to Mass every Sunday. We talk about faith, about service, about the parable of the Good Samaritan, the man on the side of the road who everyone walks past. We can't just talk about it. We can't just sit in that pew and nod along and then come back here and do nothing when we see someone left on the side of the road." He shook his head. "The White House called her a case. An individual benefits case. She's a human being. Her husband was a hero. Her son doesn't have a father. If we don't use the ridiculous, powerful platform we have to stand up for her, then what is the point of any of it? What am I even doing this for?" Evelyn listened, her expression softening. She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, just be careful, please." "I will," he promised. That night, Colbert walked onto the stage with a renewed, steely resolve. After the monologue, the lights dimmed again. The audience was silent with anticipation. "Well, it's been 24 hours, he said. And the president's watch continues. Behind him, the screen lit up with Sergeant Vance's portrait and the clock, which now read, 01 day, 03 hours, 18 minutes. Yesterday, Colbert continued, we asked a simple question on behalf of a Gold Star widow named Alara Vance. Today, the White House was asked that same question, and they gave an answer. He put on his reading glasses and picked up a card from his desk. The press secretary said, and I quote, individual benefits cases are handled by the Department of Veterans Affairs through the proper, established channels. He also said it would be inappropriate to comment on a specific case. Colbert took his glasses off and looked at the audience. Inappropriate. That's an interesting word choice. Is it inappropriate to ask why a hero's family is being abandoned? Is it inappropriate to demand that a promise be kept? It seems to me the only thing inappropriate here is hiding behind bureaucratic language while a family twists in the wind. Calling Alara Vance a case isn't an answer. It's an insult. He paused, letting the words sink in. They want you to believe this is just an isolated incident, a clerical error, a single case that will be handled. So tonight, I want to share another story. The screen changed, showing only text, no photo, to protect the family's identity. This is from the son of a master sergeant in the Air Force, Colbert read. He died last year when his transport plane suffered a catastrophic engine failure during a training flight over Nevada. His family just received a nearly identical letter to the one the Vance family received, citing the same provision, denying them their benefits. They are too scared to show their faces. They are terrified of what might happen if they speak out. So to that family, and to the White House, I say, you are not an isolated case, and we will not let them pretend you are. He turned back to the main camera, his face set. The clock is ticking. The list of names is growing. We're still waiting. The broadcast had an immediate and profound effect on Alara. The media presence outside her home intensified. A satellite truck from a major news network was now permanently parked at the end of her quiet cul-de-sac, its dish aimed at the sky like a giant mechanical ear. The first few days she kept the blinds drawn, feeling like a prisoner in her own home. She had to have a difficult conversation with Leo, who was confused about why men with cameras were standing outside his window. They're just interested in Daddy's story, sweetie, she explained, her heart aching, because he was a hero. Her in-laws, Marcus's parents, drove down from Wyoming. They were quiet, stoic people. Ranchers who had lived their whole lives with a deep suspicion of media and politics. They were proud of Marcus and furious at the VA, but terrified for Alara and Leo. Is this wise, Alara? Her father-in-law, a man named Hank with hands like worn leather, asked as he looked out the window at the reporters. Putting yourself in the middle of all this, these are powerful people you're crossing. I didn't cross anyone, Hank, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. They crossed us. They broke their word. What am I supposed to do? Just let them? Let them erase him? The argument was interrupted by a ping from Maya's encrypted text message. It was a link to a new story, published by a notoriously sleazy online tabloid. The headline was sickening. The hero husband's secret? Was Sergeant Vance a problem soldier? The article was a disgusting tapestry of innuendo and anonymous sources, hinting that the training accident might have been due to negligence on Marcus's part. It was a classic smear, designed to muddy the waters and discredit the victim. Reading it, Alara felt a surge of pure, white-hot rage that burned away all her fear. They weren't just insulting her, they were desecrating his memory. She picked up her phone and texted Maya. Tell Mr. Colbert he has my permission to use whatever he needs to. Tell him to burn them to the ground. That third night, Colbert didn't even try to hide his anger. The monologue was short, sharp, and brutal. And then, the lights dimmed for the president's watch. The clock read, 02 days, 03 hours, 15 minutes. For 2 days, Colbert began, his voice dangerously low. We have been asking for basic decency for a Gold Star family. The administration's response has been to call them a case and to ignore them. But now, their allies in the dark corners of the internet have a new strategy. If you can't win the argument, "Smear the victim." The tabloid headline appeared on the screen behind him. The audience gasped and murmured.
"This is filth," Colbert said, his voice ringing with contempt.
"It is a lie, published with the sole purpose of silencing a widow. So let's talk about who Sergeant Marcus Vance really was." The screen changed. It showed Marcus's official service record, obtained with Alara's permission. "Here is his record," Colbert said, pointing. 2 Army Commendation Medals, a Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. Expert marksman. Glowing reviews from every single one of his commanding officers. The official accident report, which we also have, cleared Sergeant Vance of any and all wrongdoing, placing the blame squarely on catastrophic equipment failure. He paused, his eyes burning with intensity. "They have lied about the bill. They have lied about this being an isolated case. And now they are lying about a dead hero. They are doing it to scare Alara Vance into silence. They are doing it to scare any other family from speaking up." He leaned forward on his desk. "Well, I have a message for you. It's not working. You didn't just pick a fight with a Gold Star widow. You picked a fight with all of us. And we are not going away. This clock is not stopping." He looked into the camera, not just as a host, but as a man who had drawn a line in the sand. The shame of it is, this isn't even about money anymore. It's about a simple, fundamental truth. You do not dishonor the people who died for this country. You just don't. The camera held on his face. The watch continued. The battle lines had been drawn, and the war of attrition had just begun. The second week of the president's watch felt like a grinding stalemate. Every night, Stephen Colbert would walk on stage, the audience would fall into a respectful silence, and the segment would air. The clock ticked past the 200-hour mark. The story was a national obsession, a nightly civics lesson in bureaucratic cruelty. But it was crashing against a wall of presidential indifference. The White House had adopted a strategy of absolute silence, calculating that the public's notoriously short attention span would eventually move on. It was a war of attrition, and the most powerful man in the world had no intention of blinking first. The pressure was immense, and Colbert's team could feel their momentum waning, their righteous anger threatening to curdle into routine. The breakthrough came from the last place anyone expected. General Thaddeus Iron T. Corrigan was a legend in the Marine Corps and a fixture in the conservative political universe. A 4-star general, retired, with a chest full of medals and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He was the embodiment of the military establishment. He was a frequent, trusted voice on Fox News, a man whose rare endorsements were sought after, and whose criticisms were feared. He was, by all accounts, a man who saw the world in black and white, duty and dereliction. He was not a man who watched, let alone sympathized with, late-night comedians. He was booked on a primetime Fox News show, and the host, assuming he knew the general's mind, lobbed him a softball question intended to put an end to the whole affair. "General," the host began with a deferential smile, "we're seeing a lot of political theater from Hollywood elites trying to use our military families as pawns. What's your take on this Colbert circus?" The general stared into the camera, his gaze so intense it felt like he could see through the lens and into every living room in America. He did not smile. "I don't give a damn about Stephen Colbert," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that commanded attention. "I don't watch his show. I don't care about his politics. What I care about is the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. I care about the sacred promise this nation makes to the men and women who wear its uniform." The host's smile faltered. This was not the expected answer. "I read the official report on the death of Sergeant Marcus Vance," Corrigan continued, his voice cutting through the studio chatter. "He was a good soldier. He died in the line of duty, preparing to defend this country. His family is a Gold Star family. This distinction the VA is making, this fine print that says one kind of sacrifice is covered and another is not, is dishonorable bureaucratic cowardice. The man who dies in service to this nation is a hero. Full stop. There is no asterisk." He leaned forward slightly. "This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of honor, and the Commander-in-Chief's first duty is to honor his troops. The President needs to fix this. He needs to fix it now."
The statement was a political earthquake. It shattered the White House's carefully constructed narrative that this was just a liberal media attack. General Corrigan had given political cover to every Republican senator and congressman who had been squirming in silence for the past 2 weeks. The dam broke. Within hours, the White House Chief of Staff's phone was ringing off the hook. The calls weren't from angry Democrats. They were from powerful, loyal Republicans who were hearing an earful from their constituents, many of whom were veterans who revered General Corrigan. The political calculus had changed instantly. Ignoring Colbert was one thing. Ignoring Iron T. Corrigan was political suicide. Less than 36 hours after the general's interview, the president acted. There was no press conference, no formal announcement, just a post on his preferred social media platform at 6:17 a.m. I have just directed the Department of Veterans Affairs to immediately close the ridiculous loophole that was hurting our great military families. I heard about this problem and am fixing it myself. We will always take care of our magnificent heroes. America first! He had, in his signature style, attempted to take credit for solving the crisis he had ignored for half a month. That night, the mood in the Ed Sullivan Theater was electric. When the time came for the segment, the audience was already on its feet. Colbert walked to his desk and waited for the applause to die down. "Well," he said, a small, weary smile on his face, "it seems the president's watch is over." A wave of cheers and applause washed over the studio. Behind him, the screen showed the president's social media post. "This morning," Colbert continued, "the president announced he had fixed the problem. And we are, of course, grateful that he did." The portrait of Sergeant Vance appeared on the screen, but this time, the clock was gone. "I want to thank all of you for watching, for caring, for making the calls and sending the emails. You reminded them that they work for you." He paused. "And I want to extend my deepest gratitude to a man of honor and integrity, General Thaddeus Corrigan, who reminded an entire country that some things are, and must always be, above politics." The screen changed one last time. It was a new photo of Alara Vance. She was standing in a park with her arm around Leo. They were both smiling. A genuine, unburdened smile, squinting in the Colorado sun. Colbert looked at the photo, then back to the camera. His voice was quiet, devoid of its usual irony. "In the end," he said, "this was never about a television show, or politics, or even a bill. It was about a promise. It was about our national character. A nation is not defined by its power or its wealth, but by the promises it keeps, especially to those who have given everything, so that the rest of us may live in peace and freedom. To the Vance family, and to all our military families, thank you. You honor us with your sacrifice. It is our unending duty to honor you in return." He looked down at his desk for a long moment, then back up. "Tomorrow we'll be back to telling jokes, but tonight, good night." He did not stop the clock. He simply let it fade to black, its duty done. A week later, a registered letter arrived at Alara Vance's home. It was from the new secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. She opened it with trembling hands. The first sentence was a formal apology for the unacceptable administrative error and the distress it had caused her family. The letter went on to confirm that her full benefits were being reinstated, retroactive to the date of suspension, and that an official policy directive, now known internally as the Vance Correction, had been issued to all VA centers nationwide. Her fight had not just saved her own family, it had saved hundreds of others from the same fate. She sat at the same kitchen table where she had filmed her desperate plea and finally let herself cry, the tears not of grief or rage, but of profound, bone-deep relief. She looked at the picture of Marcus on the mantelpiece and whispered, "We did it, honey. They remember you." 3 weeks after the final broadcast, a young legislative aide named Ben Carter sat in his tiny cubicle in the Rayburn House office building. Pinned to the fabric wall above his computer was a printed photo of Sergeant Marcus Vance. For the past fortnight, Ben had been working tirelessly, fueled by coffee and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since he first came to Washington. Inspired by the public firestorm and General Corrigan's unwavering stand, he had drafted a piece of legislation, It was short, clear, and unambiguous. It would take the Vance correction and write it into federal law, making it impossible for a future administration to reverse it with the stroke of a pen. He had just finished the final draft. The cover page read, H.R. 8142, the Sergeant Marcus Vance Memorial Act. It was just a bill, a long way from becoming law. But it was a start. It was an echo, a lasting testament to the fact that sometimes, in the face of overwhelming power, the voice of a single person, amplified by conscience, can be loud enough to change the world. What does a nation truly owe the families of those who make the ultimate sacrifice? And who holds us accountable when that promise is broken? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories that go beyond the headlines, don't forget to like and subscribe.